30,000 लीटर जो करीब
Okay, so good afternoon. Is the slide visible? Anyone please respond? Whether the slide is visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now let's proceed. So last class we have up to last class we have discussed project scheduling. We have discussed how to handle risks and the different method of scheduling. We have seen CPM, POT, etc. Now let's see. Once we will go one step ahead. We have also discussed Monte Carlo simulation and your critical chain concepts. So today we'll discuss about. We'll go one step ahead. Today we'll discuss the resource management, resource scheduling. We have so far we have seen project scheduling, how the different activities can be scheduled, and we have while scheduling the activities, you have assumed that enough number of resources are available. There is no constraint on the resources, but actually resources, there is some constraint. Not infinite number of resources are available. We are having some limited constraints. How the resources can be allocated to different activities, because only limited resources are there, that we'll see. That means we'll discuss about the activity scheduling in the presence of resource constraints. So today we'll discuss about resource management or resource scheduling. Okay, so today we'll discuss how to allocate the resources. First we'll discuss a little bit introduction to resources. Then what are the nature of resources, and we'll discuss about identifying the resource requirements or identifying resource need, identifying the resource requirements. Okay, so let's say about the introduction. As I have already told you, in project scheduling, the activity network analysis techniques, they are used for what? They are used to plan when the different activities should take place, when activity A will take place, when activity B, or when specification will take place, when design will take place, when coding will take place, like this. So that's why project scheduling, in project scheduling, activity network analysis techniques were used, right? In project scheduling, the activity network analysis techniques, they are used to what? They are used for what? They are used to plan when the different activities should take place. I have already told you that for these plans, these activity plans, they do not take into account the availability of the resources. They assume that infinite number of resources are available, no constraint on the resources, but in practice, resources are limited. So how to allocate these limited resources to the activities, when do they require? That is the subject matter of today, that is known as this resource scheduling. Now we'll discuss how to match the activity plan to available resources. So we have already made an activity plan or activity network. We are having limited resources. How can match? How can match the activity plan to the available resources? We'll also assess the efficacy of changing the plan to fit the resources whenever necessary. Because in between some manpower they left, some programmer they have left. Then how to change the plan? So we have to also assess the efficacy of the changing the plan to fit the resources, because resources, they are not constant. Sometimes some of the resources, they will disappear. Some of the manpower, they will leave. Some of the programmers, they will leave. Sometimes you got some additional money, you can get some more computers or more workstations. Then in that case, the original plan has to change. So how we can assess the efficacy of changing the plan to fit the resources, that also we'll discuss today. So now let's see what is the output of resource allocation. The final result of resource allocation will be a number of schedules. So what are the schedules we will get at the output? Number one, activity schedule, then resource schedule, then cost schedule. So activity schedule represents what? We have already discussed activity schedule earlier. So activity schedule indicates the planned start and the completion dates for each activity. Okay, so which activity will be started when and it will be completed when, that will be represented by activity schedule. So it indicates the planned start and completion dates for each activity. Then how can represent, how it can be prepared? It means the activity schedule can be prepared by using the precedence network or an activity plan. That already how to draw precedence network we have already seen in the earlier classes. output will be a resource schedule. It shows the dates on which each resource will be required. So resource schedule will show what? It will show the dates on which each of the resources they will be required and the level of that requirement. What is the level of that requirement? I mean, what is the number of the requirement or what is the number of resources required? What is the level of that requirement, that resource requirement? Whether we require 2 manpowers, 3 computers, 4 printers, like that. The level of that requirement also it will be shown by the resource schedule. Last schedule is cost schedule. It is shows the planned cumulative expenditure incurred by the use of resources over time. So what is the cumulative expenditure that you are planning, which will be incurred by the use of the different resources over the duration of the project or over the time? So that will be represented by the cost schedule. So cost schedule, it will show the planned cumulative expenditure which will be incurred by the use of the different resources over the time or over the project duration. That can be represented by cost schedule. So 3 schedules we may get are the output of resource allocation. One is activity schedule, resource schedule, and cost schedule. So what do they indicate? What do they show? We have already mentioned here. Then we'll discuss about the nature of resources. What could be the nature of resources? Let's first define what do you mean by resource. You already know. Let's formally define what is a resource. So resource means it is any item or any person which may be required for execution of the projects. For execution of the project, what item or person you are requiring, that you can term it as a resource. So it can be any item or a person. So some resources such as, for example, project manager will be required for whole duration of the project. Some resources will be required for only some specific activities, like analyst, system analyst might be required for preparing the requirement specification. Designer may be required for performing the design. There can be different designers like GUI designers, database designers, and the overall project designers. Programmer will be used for the coding activity. Tester will be used for the testing activity. But some resources, some manpower, they will be required for the whole project. Might be like, say, project manager. So project manager, some resources such as project manager, he will be required for the whole duration of the project, not for a specific activity. But some others, manpower, some other resources such as programmers, etc., they might be required for a single activity. Programmer will be required only for the coding activity. Designer will be required only for the designing activity. Tester will be required only for the testing activity. So you know already that project manager is very much vital to the success of the project. He is very efficient, then the project will success. So the success of the project largely depends on to the efficiency of the project manager. So the project manager does not require the same level of scheduling as a programmer, because programmer is associated with only one activity, coding, but project manager is associated with all the activities of the the project. So it does not require, project manager does not require the same level of scheduling as a programmer does. The project manager may request for the use of a programmer who belongs to a pool of resources at program level, isn't it? I have already discussed, differentiated the difference between a project and a program, isn't it? So a project manager may request what? May request, say, use of 1 programmer or 2 programmers. And the programmers, they belong to what? They belong to a pool of resources at a program level, because your project, your organization has maybe 2-3 programs, and under each program there are several projects. So they hire the programmers for some programs, like some academic program, some marketing program, maybe some health care domain program, like this. So the programmers, they belong to a program level, and you want for a specific project level. For that, what you have to do? You have to, as a manager, you have to request, you have to write to this program level head to spare, to depute 1 or 2 programmers for your programming activity. Now let's see the categories of resources. There are different kinds of resources, different categories of resources. These are very simple. You can read yourself, like labor, you know what is a labor, equipment, you know, materials, you know, space, you know. These are different categories of resources. No need further explanation. The other resources are, the other categories of resources are services, time, and money. These are quite easy. You will read, please yourself. Services can also be categorized as resources. For example, while you are developing a wide area distributed system, you may require scheduling of the telecommunication services. So postal services, courier services, they are also treated as what resources. Time is also an what important kind of resource. So time means the elapsed time that can be reduced. How the elapsed time can be reduced by adding more stuff. Here time can be considered as a resource. And the most important, money also it can be considered as a resource. Why? It's not, of course, a primary resource like your labor, equipment, materials, or services. Like that is not a primary resource, but it is a secondary resource. Okay, so it is a secondary resource which is used to buy the other resources. So by using money, you can buy all other previous resources. So that's why it is a secondary resource which is used to buy the other resources. It is very much similar to what? It is also similar to the other resources that you have seen here. Okay. It is similar to other resources in that it is available at a cost. So this money, it is available at a cost. So what is the cost here? In this case, it is the interest charges. You can get some money from the bank or from your friends or somewhere else by paying some interest amount. So that's why money, it is similar to other resources in that it is available at a cost, and here the cost is, in this case, it is interest charges. So money is not a primary resource, it is a secondary resource. Okay. And the examination question may be asked, give an example of a secondary resource. Okay. In that way, you have to identify, give an example of a service. So those things you should answer. Now we'll come to the actual topic, how to allocate resources. Resource allocation, the steps, what steps will be followed for allocating the resources for resource allocation. So these three important steps will follow. First step is identify the different resources which are required for each activity, and then create a resource requirement list, prepare a resource requirement list. So first step is you identify the resources which are required for each and every activity, and then create a list called as the resource requirement list. Second step is identify the different resource types. After identifying the resources, you can classify them. Identify the resource types. One example is taken here as follows. The individuals are interchangeable. You have taken, say, programmers. So the individual beings, the individuals are interchangeable within a group, isn't it? Within a group, you have taken a coding group. You have taken on testing group, you have taken on design group. So individuals within a group, they are interchangeable. For example, the Visual Basic programmers as opposed to software developers. So this is an example we have taken. Say, if there is a VB programmer, so and there is a C programmer, they cannot be interchanged. But if there are 2-3 programmers, those are working on VB, they can be interchanged. The C programmers, they can be interchanged. So for example, VB programmers as opposed to the software developers. The third step is allocate resource types to activities. So after identifying the resources and after identifying the resource types, then allocate the resource types to what? To the different activities, and then examine the resource histogram. After allocating the resource types, you can represent how you have allocated through a bar chart or a bar graph, and that can be further simplified to a resource histogram. So allocate the resource types to the activities and then examine the representation here. This is the resource histogram. So these are the steps will be required for resource allocation. Today we'll discuss only step number 1, that is the resource requirement list. How you can create how you can identify the resources, and then how you can represent the resources in the form of a list called as resource requirement list. Okay. So first step is identify the resource requirements or the resources those are needed, then prepare a resource requirement list. So let's see what are the resource requirements. So for a software project, these are the resources. Identify the resource requirements. So in order to develop a software project, these requirements we may require. One is the hardware, then the software and the support. So these are the resource requirements. So identify the hardware required for your project, identify the software that will be required for your project, identify what kind of support you need for the development of your project. Now let's start with identify hardware. What are the steps to identify the hardware? It's quite easy. List all the hardware requirements of your project. For example, how many desktops, how many servers are required, backup, what will the backup media you will require, how many keyboards, switches, ports, and cables will required, display devices, printers, touchscreens, etc. So these are basically the hardware requirements. So list all the hardware requirements of your project. Then for each piece of hardware, what you do? Specify what it needs to do. Just by listing the hardware is not sufficient. Every hardware you have to write down what will be its job, what will its function. So for each piece of hardware, specify what it needs to do. Then for each piece of hardware, specify what it needs in order to function properly. So in order to work this particular computer or server or workstation, what does it need? What does it need in order to function properly? For example, for a computer to run, you require some software, you require some connecting cables, you require maybe some switches. Those things also you have to specify. Then specify who needs what hardware to do his tasks. So all the person do not require all the hardware. So you have to specify who needs what kind of hardware to complete his tasks. So please remember, do not provide everyone with every piece of hardware. We are having so many hardware requirements. Don't give blindly, do not give haphazardly, do not provide everyone with every piece of hardware if they do not require it. Otherwise, they will just waste the time, they will waste the resources. Then last step for identifying hardware is specify when the team needs the hardware. So when the team or when the particular person he needs this hardware, and you have to give this requirement maybe in advance so that the project manager can arrange it in advance. So this requirement should be given in advance. Okay, so this is how we can these steps can be followed to identify hardware requirements. Then we shall see regarding something about how to identify the software requirements. So you know that in order to run your software that you are going to develop, some other supporting software are required. So many other supporting software such as operating system, compilers, database packages, some standard routines or standard libraries, they are needed to develop a software project. Please remember that so the basic software like operating systems, compilers, linkers or loaders or the database packages, etc., they may cause project delays if they are installed incorrectly or upgraded randomly. So that's why you have to give sufficient attention for the basic softwares like operating systems, compilers, database packages, linkers, loaders, etc. And you should ensure that they are installed correctly and they are upgraded also properly. Otherwise, they will cause the delays. They will cause delays in completion of the projects. So different versions of the software. If you are using different versions of the software, if there is some mismatched service, if there is some mismatched service, if you are using some mismatched service packs, and if you are using different releases of libraries, then obviously they will cause they will create special problems while developing your software project. If we ignore these issues, definitely it will lead to several problems. The project may be getting unnecessarily delayed. So experienced project managers, they know that software upgrades during a project cost what the team productivity and may create serious problems. So those who are already handled a lot of projects, so experienced project managers, they know that they have already felt that the software upgrades during a project, they also cost the team productivity and they may create serious problems during software development. That's why so there is a need to plan for the upgrades and schedule them. You have to make a systematic plan for the different upgrades and schedule them when the impact on the team and project can be minimized. Okay, so by using this, the impact of these upgradation, etc., that will be minimized on the team and on the project. Project managers can get a handle of software support by following below steps. So let's say some guidelines are given in the next slide. So the project managers can get a handle on the software support by using the following guidelines. What are the steps? What steps you should use to get a handle on software as a project manager? You should use the following steps. to get a handle on the software support. First step is list the software requirements. Identify what are your software requirements. List the software requirements. Then specify the software versions. Which version you are using? Version 1, version 2, version 3. You have to specify the software versions. Identify the different upgrades and the different service packs. Okay, identify the upgrades and service packs used. Then identify who upgrades which software. There are many persons in your team. You have to record who has upgraded, because so that if later on some problem, you can trace back. You can see who has upgraded for the last time. So identify who upgrades which software. Not only that, you have to specify when to upgrade which software. So when each software has to upgrade it. So you have to specify when to upgrade which software. So these are the basic steps you may follow to get a handle on the software support. Okay, these are quite easy things. Will not go in detail. So if you will go detail, it will be worrying. So you can read yourself. Like the software development team may need a well-specified set of software products so that the product inconsistency can be minimized. The different upgrades they can be planned, and licensing the software can also be done properly. So as a team here lead, you need a well-specified set of software products. So now how to do this? To get this set, the project manager needs to manage the details of the software to be used. You have to properly record them. You have to properly list them. You have to manage the details of all the software those will be used for development of your project, for the development of your software. So he may start by specifying the software that the team will need, including following. So how he can specify? So he may start by specifying the software that the team will need by specifying the followings. He has to specify what operating system he has to use, which compiler he will use, which configuration management system he will use, what kind of email systems they will use, what supporting software they will use, like for these file transfer protocols, different web browsers, etc. Whether you will use Google Chrome or Mozilla Firefox or this Internet Explorer. So what will the supporting software? Similarly, what database packages he is going to use, Oracle, Sybase, etc. So all the supporting softwares they have to be listed. Similarly, what kind of libraries he will use, like whether he is using some DLL, dynamic linking libraries, or standard template libraries, or graphic user interface libraries, etc. So what kind of libraries they will use in the project development, that have to be listed. Then what kind of Office software you will use? Only word processing is sufficient, or you will use Excel sheet, PowerPoint, etc. that you have to use. Similarly, what tools you are using? Whether you are everything you are using this MS Word, or you are using some case tools, some design tools for drawing the DFDs and UML diagrams, some testing tools for performing black box testing, white box testing, or regression testing. Similarly, some software project management tools. Okay, so find out what kind of tool they are using. Okay, so this thing has to be listed. Then is specify the software versions. Given the list of the existing software products, what you have to do? Please specify the team needs exactly which version of each of these pieces of software, because there are several versions. In last time, what version you have used? Version 1 or version 2.1 or version 3.2, like this. So we have to exactly specify which version of each of these pieces of software do you require. Also, you have to specify when changes to this might become available. So when last time there was a change to this version, also you have to specify when changes to these versions might become available. Then identify the upgrades and service packs. Okay, so you have to identify what are the upgrades, when these upgrades have been made, what are the different upgrades of the software that you are using, what are the different service packs you are using, that you have to also identify, that you have to also specify. You have known that software is not a static entity. It dynamically changes. There will be so many upgrades. There will be upgrades and enhancements from time to time. So as a project manager, you have to know, the project manager needs to know which pieces of the software require these upgrades. Okay, there are different modules. So which pieces or which modules of the software need these upgrades, and not only that, when they will occur. Okay, these upgradation when they will occur during the project. For this, you may answer the following questions for each software product that the team will use. Like what is the length of your project in relation to the upgrades, service packs, or new versions of these software products? What is the length of your project? Then will the team need to upgrade? Do we require an upgradation? Whether the team members will upgrade or who will upgrade that? And not only who will upgrade, but also when the upgrade will be available. Okay, so when will the upgrade be available? That also you should know. So you have to answer the following questions for each software product, so that you can know which piece of software needs these upgrades and when they will occur. Then next important question is not only identifying the upgrades is everything. You have to also identify who upgrades which software. You must have to keep the track so that later on if some problem, some mismatch, you can see last time who has upgraded and which software has upgraded. So because in a team there are so many persons, you are using so many versions of the software. So you have to identify who is responsible for installing and upgrading of each piece of software. The particular person must have to identify it. Identify who is responsible for installing and upgrading of each piece of software. Maybe you can give the responsibility to the system administrator or the project team head, like that. So, but you have to record, you have to mention somewhere who is responsible for installing and upgrading of each piece of software. Make sure that the project manager has identified who does what. As a project manager, you have to identify, he has identified who does what, which member does what task, and everyone agrees on who performs installation upgrades. Everybody should know, everybody must be agreed that, say, the project manager or the system manager, system administrator, he has performed the installation some upgrade. Or all the persons in the team, they may give the responsibility to one person, because if multiple persons will upgrade, there might be inconsistency. So they may give the job to only one person, might be the system administrator, who can perform the installation and upgrades, and all other persons in the team, they have to agree with the what updates or the installations that have been made by the single person, that is the system administrator. For example, as I already told you, who upgrades which software, that is important. Like that, it is also important, you must note down when to upgrade which software. So you cannot just upgrade every software on every day. So when to upgrade which software, that has to be specified, that has to be recorded. So once the project manager has a handle on the list of software and an idea of what upgrades the team will need to make during the project. Okay, so once the project manager, he has a handle on the different or on the list of software. Okay, on the list of software, the different software to be used, an idea of what upgrades the team will need, what upgrades the team will make to make what upgrades the team will need to make during the project. Then the project manager can decide when to upgrade. So based on this information, the project manager will decide when to upgrade the software. Here some guideline is given, like upgrades just before a major milestone are very risky. Don't do the updates just before a milestone, like say tomorrow you are going to testing. Don't do the upgrades today. So upgrades just before the major milestones are very risky. Or tomorrow is what you can say installation. Don't make these upgrades right now. So upgrading immediately after a milestone will allow time to troubleshoot the problems that arise. But okay, so normally what is the ideal time? You should try to upgrade immediately after a milestone is over. Like today its testing is over, then you can try to upgrade. Or today is design is over, you can do some upgrade. So upgrading immediately after a milestone, normally it will give you some time to troubleshoot the problems, to rectify the problems, but it is a drawback. What is the drawback? So it may invalidate testing done prior to the milestone. If you are doing what immediately after a milestone, so if yesterday you have tested something, then it will invalidate the testing which has been done just prior to the milestone. So that disadvantage is here. So otherwise, normally we should upgrade immediately after a milestone. But only problem is that if you are doing just before the milestone, it may invalidate the testing that you have done or you have carried out prior to the milestone. Okay. So now let us consider all the software that the team will use in the project. As a project manager, if you want to upgrade the software, then what you have to do? What you have to do? Plan to upgrade when the team and project can best handle the unexpected problem. You have to plan accordingly. You have to plan to upgrade the software when the team and project can best handle unexpected problems. Say, you see, for example, coming 2-3 days are holidays, and some time is there, or just you have finished one major activity, so a little bit relaxed. So if you are, since you are having some times and you are upgrading, if some problem comes, you have sufficient time to handle it. So that's why find out the what you plan to upgrade when the team and the different project managers, they can best handle unexpected problems. When you are having sufficient time in your hand, then you can upgrade. Please don't think that, or don't do the upgradation considering the best case scenario. Never plan on a best case scenario when upgrading software. Okay, suppose see you are testing the, what you can say, the street lights, and what you say that don't test it at this daytime, because if there is a failure you cannot know that whether the lights are working or not. So that's why you can test at the right time, night time. That is the worst case. If the light is not going, generator is not working, power backup is not working, then you can test. So never plan on a best case scenario when upgrading software. Try to plan, maybe considering the average case or the worst case. So this expect problems to occur and plan time to handle them. So if you will do in this okay, so never plan on a best case scenario. You expect the problems to occur at any time and plan the time to handle them. So now, if you are doing in the after the milestone, or if you are considering the worst case, then if problems, if they don't come, they don't pop up, then you are having some extra time, because you are considering the worst case, or you are just considering after a milestone is just happened. So you are having sufficient time to handle this. If the problems do not pop, then you are just having extra time. You can do some other work. But if the problems do pop up, then you are having some time, and this time you can use to solve the problems. So if they do pop up, then the planning provides time to handle problems, because you are having some time. You can use that time to solve the problems, to handle the problems. Then the last one, I have told 3 things we may require for the resources. Those are hardware, software, and support. We have already seen the basic steps for identifying hardwares. We have seen the steps for identifying the software, the problems associated with them, and the next one is the how to identify the support. The steps are like this. First, identify the support needed from each group. There are different groups such as requirement analysis group, coding design group, coding group, testing group, maintenance group. So identify what kind of support is needed from each group. Then specify when support will be required. Which support will be required, you have to specify, so that the project can make progress without any delay. Okay, specify which support will be required, so that the project can progress without any delay. Then specify how support occurs. How you can get the supports? You might have seen very often it's 18/24/7 support. So you have to specify how support occurs. For example, will the staff be available via phone, or via email, or in person? So that's why you see several these maintenance committees, they're available 24/7 over telephone. Some cases is the problem is not solvable by using the phone. The person comes, like we are having AMC for the UPS. If some problem happens, we may give them a call. They told, okay, minor some problem, they will just tell over phone, and we can, our technical assistant can correct. But if we measure things, because the person lies outside Rourkela, so we have to call over phone or email, and they will come within 1 or 2 days. So like that, we have to specify in the MOU what kind of support we require. We have to specify how the support occurs, whether over email, phone, or person, or something else. Then gain commitment from each group for the support required. You get a commitment that this group will provide this kind of support. This commitment can be through a verbal commitment, or a contract, or a letter, or an email, or a signed document, maybe you can use a court document, stamped document for writing down the commitments from the groups. Then, of course, you have to maintain a good relationship with the supporting staff so that whenever you will be in trouble, they will come forward to help you. So next we'll see, I have already told you, first step is identify the requirements, then you write down in a document called as the resource requirement list. Now let's quickly see how you can prepare a resource requirement list. So the first step in producing a resource allocation plan is what? The first step is to prepare a resource requirement list. So what does this list will contain? This resource requirement list will contain the different resources that will be required along with the expected level of demand. Okay, so this resource requirement list, it will contain the different resources that you will require for the developing your project along with the expected level of demand, the quantity, how many programmers, how many coders, how many testers. So you have to this project, this resource requirement list, it will contain the number of the resources, I mean the resource types that will be required for during the development of a project, and the expected level of demand. In the simple case, you can say the quantity that will be required from that particular resource type. So this can be done. What can be done? That producing a resource allocation plan, okay, that we call a resource requirement list. So producing the resource allocation plan, it can be done by considering each activity present in a precedence network. So you have to consider each and every activity present in the network, precedence network, and for each activity you have to find out what kind of resource does it require, and then you have to identify the resources required by it. So first construct the precedence network or activity network, then identify the activities, then identify each activity, or activity A requires which resources, activity B requires which resources, and how many resources. Identify the resources required by the activity, then you can write down the different resources required by the different activities. There can be some resources which are not activity specific. Of course, there will be, I have already told you, there are some resources which are required for a particular activity, but there are some resources which are required for the whole project all the time. So there can be some resources that are not activity specific, but they are part of the project infrastructure. For example, the project manager or those resources that are required to support other resources. For example, you might require office space. Office space is not required for only one project. That required for all the projects that you are executing. So like that. So there can be some resources which are not activity specific, but they are part of the project infrastructure, or those resources are required to support some other resources, like example is office space. Now I am showing a small example. This example I think we have shown somewhat previous classes. This is an example of a precedence network or activity plan. Okay, this is a precedence network. You can see that these notations I have already told you. They show the earliest start time 0, earliest finish time 34, latest start time 0, latest start time 34. This 0 is what? This is the slack value or the float value. 34, that is the duration. Name of the project is IOE, IOEP project. 1 means activity 1, and what does activity 1 represent? Specify overall design. Similarly, you see all the activities are there. So many such activities you are able to see. So this is an example by precedence network. Now looking at what I have already told you. Look at the precedence network, then identify each activities. Then for each activity, identify what resources are required for executing that activity. So you can see there are many activities you can see, and mainly you can see here overall specify overall design, then specify module A, module B, etc. Then check the specifications, then design activities for all the modules, coding activity for all the modules, and system activity. Okay, so these are the activities in that activity network or precedence network. Here we have seen. Now we have to identify the resource requirement for each activity. For example, you see, I have already told you project manager is required for all the activities. So stage is all stages, all activities, project manager. And it is estimated that it will take 104, isn't it? Like see, this project takes how many days? 104 days. So it is applicable for 104. And FT means full time. Project manager has to be full time person. Then the workstation that will be required for all the activities, and you may require say 34 workstations. And for those workstations, notice that we have to check the software availability. Then we can see that project and activity one. Activity one means this one. What is specify the overall design. So for specifying the overall design, we require a system analyst, isn't it? Specify requirement specification. We require a system analyst, and it is estimated that it will take 34 days. It is see. How many days it will take? 34 days. So it will take 34 days. And what we have to do? That we have, sorry, this check software availability is for the workstation. Okay, this is done. So I'm sorry. So IUP1, yes, P1 is the specify overall design. And what do we require? One system analyst, senior system analyst. And for how many days? 34 days. So 34, and it is full time. Similarly, so you may require one activity or one senior analyst for that. Similarly, stage 2, this is stage 2. This is mainly specifying the different activities. So in stage 2, I require a workstation, maybe 3, one per person essential. Okay, one per person essential. And in P2, we require what? One analyst designer. P2, this is P2. P2 is the specify. So specify module A, module B, module C, and module D. So we require either an analyst or a designer. And for how many days? 20 days full time we require. Similarly for P3, P3 is this one. Where is P3? P2, this is P3, this is P4, this is P3, specify module B. And we require one analyst or designer, maybe for days 15 days, isn't it? Like this P3, where is P3 here? So 34 plus 15, 49. So 15 days we require for 15 days. So like this, identify the stages, in which stage what activity is there. So for that activity, how many resources will be required? For how many days? What is the quantity? Like say when we are specifying the physical quantities like workstation, etc., we have specified say in activity 1. So sorry, for the all activities you require workstation for 34 days, but for all activities in stage, this is in stage 1. All activities in stage 2 we require 3 workstations, like that. So similarly in stage 3 for activity 6, this is activity 6. We require a senior analyst, and he may require 2 full time. Okay, there is 2 full, you can say, and like this. So for different activities, identify the different resources, write down in the table, mention for how many days you require, full time or part time, and how many quantities, wherever it is required, it is appropriate, and if any what node is there you can use. Like for this P5, what is P5? P5 you can see, P5 is this. It is specify module D. For this P5, we may require what? For P5, either we can use an analyst or a programmer, because it is there what specifying module D. So we can use either an analyst or programmer. This kind of notes you can write down. This kind of comments you can write down in the last column, which is representing notes. Okay. So similarly, how many such activities are there? You can see 6, 7 like this, 15. So we have to identify for all. See 15. Yeah, there are 6 stages, 15 activities for all those 6 stages, and 15 activities. For which activity, what resource will be required? For how many days? quantity if required, and if any special comment or special note you can write down here. So in this way you prepare a requirement list. So this is a sample requirements list. This is the precedence network or the activity network. Looking at the activity network, as a project manager, I have prepared this list, this resource requirement list. So this means that for each activity, how many resources we require, those we have written here. This is the resource requirement list. Today I have discussed the different categories of resources. We have explained the identification of the resource requirements. The resource in this different category of resources we have discussed, like manpower or labor, equipment, then service, time, money. Those are the different categories of resources. We have also explained the identification of resource requirements, how you can identify the different resource requirements. And the different resource requirements I have told, it can be hardware, it can be software, it can be support. We have also presented the steps required for identifying the different hardwares required for the project, different softwares that will be required for the project, and the different support staff that will be required for the project. We have presented the steps for identifying the hardware, software, and support staffs required for the project. We have also discussed how to prepare the resource requirement list. We have taken a sample example, and we have taken a sample example of the activity network, or this precedence graph, or this what you can say activity plan, or what we can say that the activity network. We have drawn a network that requirement. Okay, the resource list. Okay. We have already taken these things from these two books. Mainly this is available in this #1 reference. So what I have told, this is available in the #1 reference, and some things I have taken from some other material. That book name is not there here. Okay, thank you very much. So very easy chapter today we have discussed. So in the next class we will discuss this. There are 3 steps for resource allocation. First step we have discussed identification of the resource requirements. In the next class, we'll discuss the remaining 2 steps. Thank you very much. Any doubt, please? Yes, any doubt, please?